This is a very rare kind of review on the channel, as I almost never discuss any DLC for any game ever, and have only done 2 reviews for one DLC update, one for Star Wars Battlefront 2 and another for Mortal Kombat 11. Of course, this was quite a long time ago. I definitely won't make it a habit to discuss DLC to this degree, but I want to update my Final Fantasy VII Remake deconstructive review by adding on to it rather than editing what's there, because my stance on the remake to Final Fantasy VII hasn't changed. The remake was, and still is, very disappointing when compared to the original, and does not in any way live up to the first game, aside from the bombing mission at the beginning. Seeing as how I not only didn't care for the Final Fantasy VII Remake or Final Fantasy XV, and have thoroughly despised just about everything that Square Enix has done for a number of years now, including the highly overrated Nier Automata, the disappointing Kingdom Hearts 3, the even more disappointing Shadow of the Tomb Raider, the abysmal Dissidia Final Fantasy NT, and the even worse Avengers game, with the only diamond in the rough being Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, I went into the Intermission DLC for the Final Fantasy VII Remake with zero expectation that it would be good. With that said, I was thoroughly surprised that the DLC, which sits at around 5 hours in length, is rather good. It's actually not that bad at all, and I believe there's a few reasons for why it works. For one, the DLC doesn't really touch on the story of the main game too much. There's enough information given to the player that reveals what time the DLC takes place and why Yuffie has come to Midgar to begin with. For 2, Yuffie herself is very cheerful, and some might say that she's childish to the extreme to the point of being annoying.
Attention! You know the drill. You want to play? You gotta fork over. What's your deal? And why are you dressed like a 5-year-old? That's just weird. What are you talking about? This isn't weird. It's super cute. Super cute? More like super lame. Not as lame as Midgar.
However, unlike Aerith or Tifa, both of whom were completely misrepresented in the main game compared to the original, Yuffie in this DLC acts the same as the Yuffie that was in the original Final Fantasy VII. Again, she's cheerful and childish to the extreme to the point of being aggravating. However, one thing they could have done similar to Aerith and Tifa is update Yuffie's attire, as the character is simply too young to sport a skimpy outfit where her navel is showing. But I suspect the reason Square Enix doesn't want to update the attire of the characters is for nostalgia purposes, of course. Combat-wise, Intermission is pretty much the same as what's found in the main game, with all of the same problems that exist in the main game. The same terrible decision of not including invincibility frames with certain attack animations is present, or really any animation in general. The same slow and sluggish defense mechanic is still present. And of course, the same questionable weapon upgrade system that's more reminiscent of Final Fantasy XIII rather than Final Fantasy VII is also still present, along with the egregious stagger system, which again, I'm not sure why that's a thing in a remake to Final Fantasy VII, but I digress. They did add one interesting mechanic where you, the player, and another AI companion can team up and attack in unison at the same time. It reminds me of some of the team battle mechanics that was present in Kingdom Hearts 2, just limited to a menu system here. So I will give them kudos for that. Still, this is really the only new thing that was added to the combat system. The rest of it is pretty much the same. With regards to the narrative, the whole thing is very silly. And it's obviously easy to tell that Square Enix just had to come up with some kind of excuse to force Yuffie into the game in a way that doesn't interfere with the main story. In a nutshell, Yuffie has come to Midgar to hunt down a powerful piece of materia. The end. That's it. There's your story. They even made up some random character to give the player some kind of party system that one would expect in a Final Fantasy experience. And surprise, surprise, the character dies by the end of the DLC. It's all very stupid, but considering it's not 30 plus hours of stupid like with the main game, I didn't mind it too much. When it's all said and done, Intermission is a neat little addition to the Final Fantasy VII Remake, but considering the way it was distributed, being used as a cheap garner to entice PlayStation owners who don't already have a PS5 to go out and buy one, it was clearly nowhere near good enough to go and spend $400 to $500 on an ever-elusive video game console that still struggles to keep up with the high demand, just to play this. And even with the PC release, which I actually did try and pirate this game, but Unfortunately, due to the nature of the Epic Games Store and how that works, I was actually forced to buy the game on PC, albeit for a $20 discount in order to play the DLC. Square Enix's terrible anti-consumer handling of the PC release has made it even more clear that to even play Intermission in the first place, one has to jump through great financial hoops, and the DLC within of itself is not worth the trouble. Although, I did rather enjoy the best part, which was the remake's version of the Fort Condor minigame. They did a great job there, admittedly. Now, does Intermission give me hope that the second part of the Final Fantasy VII Remake will be any good and worth my time personally? Not really. No. Right now, it's still a waiting game to see if Remake Part 2 will be worth anyone's time. But as it stands now, the Intermission DLC is okay, if you can play it. Which, if you're stuck on PS4, suffice enough to say, you're not missing much.
The door.
What floor?
The basement. Advanced weaponry.
Going down. Doors closing.
Perfect. Just perfect. Huh?